Minister of Higher Education Nzimande addressed South Africa on progress made in response to the COVID-19 pandemic today. He said there is a concern about cluster outbreaks in the Eastern Cape and KZN at institutions recently, and a multidisciplinary team, including members of the World Health Organization, are helping to devise ways to limit the spread of infections at those institutions of higher learning. A lot of topics coming up to discuss. We're joined by Senior Research Associate at UJ, Professor Mary Metcalfe. Professor, thank you so much for being with us. He was just talking about cluster outbreaks today. I guess the last thing any sector wants, particularly education, is the feared second wave.
Absolutely, Francis. I think that it's very hard for everyone, but particularly hard for young people to maintain the physical distancing, to be in the prime of your life at a higher education institution, at an FET college, and not be able to socialize, to meet with friends, to mix. It's a hard time for young people, but we know the lessons of what works. Physical distancing, wearing masks, hand sanitizing. It's possible to still be socially connected, but physically maintaining the safety of yourself and others. This question of higher education institutions across the world, we are seeing them as sites of outbreak, and it requires a particular discipline. We don't want to see young people being isolated. We want to see them behaving responsibly.
Yeah. Well, look, given the disruptions this year, hopefully everything can stay open now, but this was so interesting. He said a number of universities are pointing to better student performance. They found multiple factors for that, maybe the blended learning, maybe students going at their own pace. Did you expect anything like that?
It's very interesting. The blended learning may be a possibility. It may be that learners are able to spend more time with material that has been made available to them online, which they've been able to store offline. And I also wonder about the relative isolation, and that there's less of attraction and less of a temptation to be socially interacting. So it comes with advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, it's kind of like living in a very cold country where you have to stay indoors and study. You can't go out and play, basically.
Yes. The thing about studying indoors and staying indoors is that we also need ventilation. So I know, talking to academic colleagues internationally, they're saying it's so hard to be inside when it's cold and try to ventilate. So we're lucky that we've got the weather on our side.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a great sign that some students are doing better, but he did say institutions responded at different paces, and we know it's been different. Looking across the board, schools, universities, what about the matric class? What are you hearing in terms of the number of people who will sort of end this year feeling left behind?
That is a problem that has to be uppermost in our mind as educators. Children and learners have had much less time at school than we ever imagined. For example, the grade 12s who are writing now lost as much as 17% of the school year. But some grades, like grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, and 10, lost 40% of time. And coming back to school after the periods of lockdown is one thing, but we need to know that most grades have also been in a position where they attend on alternate days. So you may be back at school, but you're still losing more time. Now that has a huge impact on the opportunity to learn. It has a huge impact from grade 1, all the way through to matric. And one of the things that the country needs to understand is that this is not going to be quickly fixed. The challenges of 2020 are still going to be picked up in 2021 and 2022 because learners have lost a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, how do you see that playing out? So he said that he was confident that most universities would end the year by March next year. Then we know the matriculants only get their results in February next year, so there's a lot more uncertainty for them. At this time, you usually sort of know where you're going, whether you're going to get a place or not, or I guess that happens in early January. But how do you think things will be knocked out? So by March, you're saying we won't be on a good wicket.
So the first thing is that the higher education sector and the basic education sector have, I think, worked so that the two time frames articulate. By the time learners get their matric results and are able to apply for post-secondary education opportunities, the universities should be in a position to process applications after the exams of the university class of this year are complete. So the articulation of the transition from the schooling sector to the post-schooling sector, we can see that the time frames are connecting. For matriculants, there's also the issue of them having an opportunity to write supplementary exams, and to feel that however they perform, it's not a final statement on their potential, and that if they haven't performed as well as they would like, there will be opportunities to rewrite. This means that all of us need to be supporting the class of 2020.
Yeah. All right, we'll see how that plays out early next year. Right now, a lot of students concerned about funding. A huge predicament for those people who were getting funding maybe to stay in reses this year, but they couldn't stay there. There calls for refunds. I know even children at school, their parents are saying, they didn't really go to school, do I have to pay? But how do you think institutions should deal with those calls right now?
One of the challenges of the impact of COVID is how it affects institutions and their viability going forward. I know in the school sector, there's many parents that are saying, why do I need to pay school fees when my child hasn't been at school the whole year? But we need to preserve our social institutions of schools and of universities. Those of us who can contribute to their ongoing sustainability need to do so, because we can't have such valuable social institutions collapsing because resources have been withdrawn because of COVID. We have to work harder to make sure that they flourish and are there to support us in the years ahead.
And still standing after all of this. Thank you so much for that analysis, former Education MEC and Research Associate at the University of Johannesburg.